Hi, I'm Bill Simmons and welcome to my channel, Closer to God in 15 Minutes or Less. We're continuing our study of Paul's epistle to the Philippians, the general background information, and this is part 2. And we're going to start off talking about the nature of the church in Philippi here. One of the things I want to add right off is that Philippi had a very long military tradition here. It started really with Philip of Macedon. He was a great warrior. His goal was to consolidate the various fiefdoms throughout Greece, and he did that and made one nation of Macedonia here. And having accomplished that, he put a lot of attention to the city of Philippi. And so the original name of the city was Crinides, which meant little fountains due to a lot of springs in the area here. But it was renamed Philippi after Philip of Macedon here. Now, the whole entire kingdom was bequeathed to his famous son, Alexander the Great, 356 to 323 BC. And Philip wanted his son Alexander to be a scholar and not a soldier here. And Alexander's tutor was none other than the great philosopher Aristotle. However, Alexander preferred war over words, and in less than 15 years he had conquered the entire known world. And Aristotle actually did have influence on Alexander, even though Alexander took the route of a great world conqueror. Aristotle did have influence over him because Alexander had a campaign of infusing all of his conquered territories with the Greek culture and the Greek language and the Greek political system here. The word that's used to describe Greekizing, if you will, all of these conquered nations is Hellenization, making all of the conquered peoples come under the umbrella of Greek language, culture, and politics, so to speak. And part of that, as I indicated here, is that Alexander made Greek the secondary language of his empire, encompassing the entire Mediterranean basin, all the way down even to the continent of India, westward all the way through North Africa. Greek was spoken as a secondary language in all of these cultures here. And that had a great influence over the Bible. Even the Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek. It's known as the Septuagint or the 70, and there's a story behind that. But all of our earliest manuscripts of the New Testament are in Greek, and that's because of Alexander the Great here. Now, so adding to this military history is subsequent to the Greek conquest and influence, the Romans took over, and the Roman Empire started here. In 146 BC, the Romans conquered the Greeks with the full consent of the citizens of Philippi. You can see that in Acts 16:21. And what's the point here? The Philippians were very proud of their military history, and throughout Paul's epistle to the Philippians, there's a lot of military terminology and a lot of military imagery in this book, as we shall see here. So, yeah, really, we can't understand much of what Paul is saying in Philippians unless we understand or appreciate this very long and substantial military influence here. Now, as I said, the Philippians welcomed the Romans with open arms. They did not resist. And as a reward for their cooperation, the Romans greatly enlarged Philippi. And by 31 BC, Philippi became an official Roman colony, as you can see in the book of Acts, chapter 16, verses 11 and following. Now, as a result of this, that is, receiving the status of a Roman colony, they were able to enjoy what's called the ius Italicum, that is, Italian justice. And what that meant is that every free person, let me put it that way, that was born in Philippi was automatically a Roman citizen and automatically enjoyed all of the protections of Roman law. Being in Philippi was just like you were on Roman soil in Rome itself here. And this also had a financial benefit as well, that the Philippians were exempt from heavy taxation, unlike Israel, and we read a lot about tax collectors in Israel for the Romans. The Philippians were exempt from heavy taxation as well as enjoying Roman justice, so to speak. Now, just a little side note here, all of this military influence here might explain some of the radical behavior we see by some of the Philippians, particularly the Philippian jailer. As when the jail was broken open and all the bars were open, he thought all of the prisoners escaped here, and he attempts to commit suicide. Now, it's part and parcel with Roman military culture that if you fail at your military duty, you take your own life. And so the Roman Philippian jailer was getting ready to take his own life, and Paul stopped him, as we know, and he was gloriously converted to the faith here. Also in Philippians, Paul speaks quite a bit about citizenship, and citizenship was very important in the Roman Empire and very coveted in the Roman Empire. And Paul speaks about citizenship in Philippians, but he says an interesting thing. He indicates that, our citizenship really is in heaven, not in any worldly empire here. And we'll study more about that under Ecclesiology here. All of this meant that the city of Philippi had a very low Jewish population. It was predominantly a Gentile city here. And that may smack a little bit of some anti-Semitism, that is, Jews were not welcome to move into Philippi and to live there here. The downside of that is that there appears that there was no synagogue in Philippi. If you recall, when Paul went to Philippi, he didn't go to a synagogue. He asked where there was a place of prayer, because it only took 10 male heads of households, only 10 intact Jewish families to establish a synagogue. And so this probably means there weren't even 10 Jewish families living in Philippi here. Predominantly a Gentile city here. Paul asked for the traditional place of prayer, if you remember, and he was told that as the Sabbath ensues, if there are any Jews in the city, they meet down by the river. And that's where he went, and he met a businesswoman, as we recall. Her name was Lydia. She was from Thyatira, and she was a God-fearer. That's an important term we can talk more about later on. A God-fearer is a Gentile who acknowledges that the God of Judaism, Yahweh, is the only true God, but they don't completely convert to Judaism here. And Lydia was that kind of person. She worshiped Yahweh, she feared Yahweh, but she did not convert to Judaism to where she had to obey the law of Moses and all the purity regulations and things of that nature here. This is a special group of people, those who fear God. It's mentioned several times in the book of Acts, and they were, if you will, a very lucrative field for converts to Christianity here, because now they could be full members of the people of God without first converting to Judaism here. Now, Lydia was the first convert. We noted that. The church at Philippians appears to have had a significant number of women in the church here. Paul in Philippians mentions women who worked with him. He exhorts two women, Euodia and Syntyche, to be reconciled here. As we noted, Lydia is the first member, and she had a church in her household here. So all of this kind of gives us an indication that women had an important role in the church at Philippi. Another point we need to make is that Philippi was a very generous and loving church here. They were the only ones who sent aid to the Apostle Paul when he was in Thessalonica and also in Corinth. Their emissary Epaphroditus risked his own life in bringing a love offering to the Apostle Paul here. Paul felt very comfortable with his church. He doesn't defend his apostleship in this church as he does in other epistles here. He uses the personal pronoun I over 100 times in the epistle to Philippians. So yeah, very positive profile, if you will, of the church in Philippi here. So, in summary, Philippi was named after Philip of Macedon, the great Greek conqueror here. His son, Alexander the Great, took over all the known world in less than 15 years. And after that, the Romans took over, and the Philippians welcomed the Romans with no resistance, and the Romans rewarded them with the coveted ius italicum, the justice of Italy, so to speak, and they were exempt from taxation, as we saw, heavy taxation. We saw that. On the downside, very few Jewish people in the church at Philippi. No synagogue in the church at Philippi. Lydia, a God-fearer, was the first convert. Appears to be a significant number of women in the church there, and it was a very giving church and a very loving church. And Paul did not feel on the defensive with this church at all. We're going to move on to other areas of study in Philippians. I hope you enjoyed the lesson.